Welcome to your Thinking Styles Introduction course. Today, we'll explore the fascinating world of neuroscience, brain development, and understanding thinking styles. This knowledge will prepare you for better understanding and appreciating your personal quadrants thinking styles assessment results reveal. Let's dive in. As we grow up, study, and work, our brain develops and builds skills to process information efficiently. Our experiences in our youth, with family, friends, and school, then later on in our jobs, career, and relationships contribute to developing the brain. The more we engage in the same kinds of activities, the more expertise, speed, and agility our brain develops in those areas. This phenomenon is known as brain dominance and fluidity. The brain prefers using its most developed area to process information quickly and save energy for complex tasks. Processing in areas of the brain that are less developed is certainly possible. However, because the brain uses more calories and energy when working those parts of the brain, we get physically tired after an extended period of time. That said, whenever possible, if the brain can find what seems to be an adequate interpretation of what it receives as messages and words in its most dominant area, it will stop looking for answers. Let's put this idea of physical exhaustion into a real-life context. Once a year, we do our taxes. If we are not used to working with numbers, tax preparation can be very tiring, both mentally and physically, because we are using a part of the brain that we don't regularly use. However, if you're an accountant or a CPA and you are constantly preparing tax returns, you can use the numbers part of the brain for hours, even days, and you don't seem to get tired, because that is where your area of expertise, brain development, and brain fluidity lies.
In 1981, the classic left brain right brain concept captured the public's imagination, leading to humorous stereotypes about left-brainers and right-brainers. Since that time, there have been many research studies done to suggest that the front and back of each hemisphere of the human brain is dedicated to specific functions and filters through which we interpret words and messages. Different researchers, theorists, and institutions use distinct labels, color schemes, or terminology to represent the quadrants and their associated concepts. This leads to variations in how these models are understood and applied. Despite the variations in labels and specific interpretations, the core concept of using quadrants to represent different cognitive preferences, learning styles, personality traits, or other aspects of human behavior remains a unifying theme across these frameworks. In our model, the front left quadrant of the brain has been referred to as the convergent thinking, logical thinking, or analytical thinking area of the brain. Other terms have been rational, reasoned, critical, and evidence. Taking the many possible terms into account, we decided to label this quadrant the data quadrant because it looks for numbers, information, analysis. The things and the what. The back left quadrant of the brain has been referred to as the practical thinking, structured thinking, or procedural thinking area of the brain. Other terms might be organized, methodical, ordered, and systematic. We have labeled this quadrant of the brain the process quadrant because it looks at sequence, steps, quality, and procedures, relying on the how to get things done. The back right quadrant of the brain has been referred to as the emotional thinking, relational thinking, or social thinking area of the brain. Other terms are interpersonal, empathetic, human-centric, and understanding. We have given this quadrant the label people quadrant because it looks at emotions, feelings, and the work environment. This part of the brain is always focused on the human aspect of a topic and the who. The front right quadrant of the brain has been referred to as the creative thinking, visionary thinking, or innovative thinking area of the brain. We decided to give this quadrant the name future quadrant because it looks at where things can go, innovation, imagination, inventions, and problem solving to move forward. This part of the brain is constantly looking toward the future, creating something new, and continually asks itself, what if, as a way to look for new and fresh ideas. These four quadrants work together, enabling individuals to think, communicate, and problem solve from various perspectives. Understanding these thinking styles allows us to tailor our communication effectively, ensuring our messages resonate with our audience. With the understanding that each quadrant has its own language, this also highlights a very important consideration when communicating with people. And that is that
a single word or phrase can be interpreted in 4 different ways depending on the dominant thinking style of the listener. For example, the phrase complicated project, without any context or guidance on how to think about that idea, will mean different things to different people. Data thinkers might consider a project complicated by focusing on complexity in terms of costing a lot of time and money, while process thinkers may see it as a complicated project because it has many steps. People thinkers might consider the project complicated because it involves many people, and future thinkers may view it as a complicated project for having many options and possibilities. So, while in our mind our intention about the word or phrase is quite clear because we likely use our dominant part of the brain when crafting the message, without providing the listener additional context or guidance on how you would like the idea to be thought about, we risk thinking that we are totally clear in our communication when in fact there are other interpretations taking place. As previously mentioned, when the brain receives information, it seeks the path of least resistance to understand the message and use the least amount of energy possible. Without guidance or context, it starts with the dominant quadrant looking for a reasonable way to understand the incoming information. In essence, it has a processing route from the most dominant quadrant to the least dominant quadrant in search of an adequate interpretation for what is being heard. If it doesn't find a suitable answer or interpretation in the most dominant quadrant, it moves on to the next most dominant quadrant, following the processing route. As an example, this person is dominantly data-focused, as noted by the blue piece of the pie being the largest, and therefore naturally processes information through the data, or what, filter first. If it needs to keep searching for an answer, this person will then move to the process-focused quadrant, the green. If it still needs an answer, the brain will bounce over to the future-focused quadrant. And finally, as a last resort, the people-focused area. However, if told out of the gate to think about the topic in the people perspective, this person will be able to go there first, but only because there was a context or guidance to start there. Understanding this helps us tailor our communication for better comprehension and interpretation. It is important to explain that most people are dominant in one quadrant of the brain. Some people are bidominant, meaning that they are equally developed in 2 areas of the brain. An even smaller portion of the population is tridominant. And a very small portion of the population is quad-dominant. While being quad-dominant may sound amazing and having the brain of Dr. Xavier and X-Men, it has its challenges. For people who are quad-dominant, their brain does not know where to start. Each area of the brain is equally able to process information without expending more energy than another. The person becomes unpredictable in how they will filter information. On the flip side, somebody who is quad-dominant can quite easily relate to people from any of the quadrant perspectives. For those who work with a quad-dominant person, it can be frustrating because the person they are talking to can and does start anywhere in the brain, making it very hard to know how they will react to what is being said. Somebody who is dominant in one quadrant is far more predictable in how they will react because their brain always starts with that dominant quadrant.
Some quadrants are natural opposites. For instance, data and people. Data thinkers might perceive the people thinkers as warm and fuzzy people, while people thinkers might view the data thinkers as cold and numbers-driven. However, it's essential to recognize that everyone can learn skills from other quadrants. Let's look at an example of learned skills. With this pair of opposites, data and people, let's consider the example of Christy, a saleswoman who enters her sales career. Salespeople are typically more people-focused. They like being with people, talking to people, making them feel good, selling them things they need. But they might not focus so much on the numbers, except for commissions. However, in Christy's case, as she goes through her career and grows into the role of a sales director, she does need to learn how to work with numbers and reports and analyze things, but that doesn't just turn on overnight. She learns little by little. She trains her brain on how to work with those numbers in the data-focused quadrant. Training her brain to work in this quadrant over time, she doesn't get tired, and by the pinnacle of her sales director career she might be able to spend days in numbers, spreadsheets, and reports quite adeptly and not tire. However, those learned skills for the data quadrant will never overtake the natural people dominance and become Christie's most dominant quadrant. She is still people-focused as a natural, dominant quadrant. She has simply learned the skill of how to be data-focused and analyze numbers. The other two quadrants make up the other set of natural opposites, the process-focused and the future-focused. For somebody who is very structured and follows processes to the letter, if you were to say, "Hey, let's think creatively about the future without any guidelines," they might say, "Sounds fun, but tell me the steps on how to get to that point of thinking creatively, and then I will be happy to think out of the box." And to many of us, the creative, future-focused people seem to have no structure. But yet, they actually do in their own way, but maybe it's not as obvious to the rest of us. And that can be seen, for example, in a painter who knows the techniques and what to do first, second and third when they're creating a painting. However, in general terms, if you were to stick those future-thinking people inside a very strict process, they might feel confined. Concerning the learned skills for this pair of opposites, the painter, Alan, has learned the skills, techniques, and process of painting, the structure and flow. But he is still most dominant artistically and creatively as he envisions his future masterpiece. Whereas the process-dominant people often build their creativity in their problem-solving skills. When they are following a process and hit a speed bump, a roadblock, or a stumbling block, they say, something's not working. What can we do? They bounce over to the creative area of the brain and ask, well, what if we try this? They find an idea and jump back and try it. If it doesn't work, they bounce back over and come up with another idea. So, over time, they build the skills of problem solving and creativity. Very structured people will not say, "Hey, we ran into a roadblock. Let's go over and just think creatively for hours and come up with a long list of options." They will usually ping into the future thinking area, find an idea that makes sense, then run back, try it, and go back and forth as needed, in small spurts.
Shifting gears a little, let's put these concepts into a common day scenario. Let's look at a project between a married couple. Imagine that they are going to throw a big party. It's not just a couple of hours party. It's going to be a 7-hour party. It's really a project. There are 4 activities that are important for the party. 1. They need to decide on the theme and build it out beyond the mere topic. 2. There needs to be some pre-party planning for the budget, the food, the decorations, and the music. 3. Somebody needs to be able to greet the guests, break the ice, mingle, and network, because nobody is going to sit in the corner under a plant at their party. Everybody's going to have fun. And 4, because it's more than just a couple of hours, they're not going to simply throw a couple bowls of chips on a table. They're going to have plenty of food. It's a whole night thing, so they need someone who will prepare and bring out the food, keeping the people happy without them going hungry, meaning that someone will have to work in the kitchen. So, with these 4 activities in mind, let's look at some couples and their thinking styles and how they might work together on this project.
Here we see couple A. Spouse number 1 is very data-focused and has some people-focused skills built. And spouse number 2 is very future-thinking with some people and process-learned skills. For the party, number 1 might say, "Honey, you set the theme, I'll do the planning and then, we'll enjoy the party." The question comes with who's going to do the food. Number 2 might because she has some green, some structure, but if they are her friends, she's not going to want to be in the kitchen all the time. She could say, "Well, you go in there," but with so little green, spouse number 1 likely would get physically worn out after an hour and it could become a disaster. So the best thing for this couple to do, understanding themselves, might be to hire a caterer or bring in a family member, somebody who can be in the kitchen getting all that done so they can just enjoy their friends at the party with their red quadrants.
In couple B, spouse number 1 is very people-focused and has some process and data mixed in. Spouse number 2 is super people-focused with some creative and future-thinking development. Knowing this, number 1 might say, "You're more creative than I am. You set the theme and I'll do the planning, no worries there, and then we are going to party. We are going to have so much fun." But we come back to the same problem of the food. Number 1 might not want to be in the kitchen if they are his friends, and number 2 won't last too long in there. This couple might be better off having their party at a restaurant where they don't have to worry about any of the food preparation.
Now let's look at couple C. With this couple, spouse number 1 is very process-driven and has a strong development in the data area. Spouse number 2 is really structured and process-driven and then has some people and creative or future development. So, number 1 might say, "You set the theme and I'll do the pre-planning things. Then we are going to structure this party like no other party. We will have activities every 10 minutes, there will be prizes and surprises. It will be really, really well structured." The problem with this couple is that their party might actually end up being in the kitchen because they both are so structured and into the process of how the party will take place that they might want to be personally in charge of the food for the party.
Yes, we admit that these might seem like extreme cases and a little exaggerated, but we hope you get the idea of how thinking styles and working together can be very important so that you have balance without blind spots. A balanced representation of all 4 quadrants leads to successful collaborations. For instance, in a partnership, like 2 party planners. One planner, who is dominant in people and future thinking, and the other in data and process thinking, complement each other's strengths, ensuring a comprehensive approach and inclusive perspectives. Being aware of each other's thinking style strengths allows them to use their talents and trust that the other one person has more ideas, expertise, and experience in their non-dominant areas. Before requesting your Quadrants Thinking Styles assessment results, we invite you to reflect on your dominant thinking style or styles. Are you most developed in the what, how, who, or what if? Having a hunch as to what your dominant quadrant or quadrants are will help you better interpret and use your assessment results with the coach. You've now learned some very basic explanations and insights into brain development and thinking styles. Remember, each thinking style is a unique piece of the puzzle, and together, they create a complete and brilliant picture. As you embark on your continuous journey of self-discovery, communication, and collaboration, celebrate the awareness of understanding thinking styles will have for yourself and with others. Thank you for joining us in this cursory exploration of thinking styles explanation. Now, go ahead and take the next step in understanding yourself and your brain dominance by scheduling your thinking styles results reveal call. Have a fantastic day filled with data, process, people, and future thinking.